Cruella. So Cruella, as you can undoubtedly tell, refers to the iconic female villain who is obsessed with Dalmatian dogs and who has the infamous black and white hair. Cruella is probably one of the most extraordinary and most memorable film characters of all time, and besides the animated film and the original book by Dodie Smith, we've already seen the character in 2 previous live action films before, 101 Dalmatians in 1996 and in 2000 102 Dalmatians, which both starred Glenn Close. Now those 2 films were a duology that were more or less a remake of the previous animated film. So when they came up with this idea of a new film featuring Cruella, Disney must have just thought to themselves, what can we do now, instead of remaking it, to create something different? What if we made an origin story about Cruella herself? So it's basically the Disney female version of Joker. Although we have had a Disney villain origin story before in the form of Maleficent and its sequel Mistress of Evil. Now whether you'd call Cruella a reboot, a spin-off or a prequel is entirely up to you, but it follows the backstory of her character when she was younger, as she was first introduced as Estella. She is an aspiring and creative young woman with a keen eye for fashion, and upon meeting Horace Jasper and eventually Baroness von Hellman, she goes on a dark path that culminates in her becoming the Cruella De Vil we all know. So of course the film is obviously going to explore her past and eventually will end where she becomes Cruella. So you already know what's going to happen at the end before you've even started watching it, but it's the story in between that kind of will fill the gaps about the character's own history. But it also kind of made me question, why do we need a backstory? How is this story going to contribute to the character we all know so well anyway, from 2 previous live action films, an animated film, and also the original book? To just explore her past was an interesting avenue to go down for Disney in my opinion, because the character of Cruella has very dark and very sinister psychological themes about her. A lot of her motives are pretty dark that go beyond the melodramatic factors that we've seen in the other Disney villains that we've seen before. Although Cruella does have a lot of melodramatic factors about her that are very traditional in some way to the Disney villains that we all know, but at the same time, as opposed to some of them, in fact the majority, there are a lot of psychological themes that are explored in her character that we don't really identify with compared to other ones before. And to be honest, her motives are pretty dark anyway, because the fact that her entire motive, at least before this film, was simply to just capture dogs, skin them, and make a coat out of their fur for just her benefit, whether it's for her fashion business or just her sense of narcissistic kind of mindset. That is literally her character. But of course they still had to keep a lid on it, because of course it's still a film for children. So it kind of raised a few things in my mind about how are they going to create such unique psychological themes, quite dark ones, for children, in terms of how she feels about dogs, how she feels about how society has treated her, her relationships that we see in this film, why she acts the way she does. They had to play it safe in terms of what they can portray and represent, and it was good because they kind of struck a fine balance in my opinion about creating some psychological idea of how a character goes from good to bad, but at the same time still makes it understandable and I guess familiar for the younger audience to appreciate and understand a lot more. And that's why I would probably say that Cruella is one of my favourite Disney characters. I've actually done a video on that already, so the link will be above and you can check that one out if you haven't already. And to be fair, it did a decent job in creating a story that was traditional to the character while also giving us something different. And what I mean by that is that we obviously understood that she had an eye for fashion and that she had an appreciation for dogs, but it was just her relationships with humans more than anything that really kind of challenged her psychological trauma and her mindset. So like I say, I'm not going to give too much away as to what actually happens, but it definitely explores the themes of human relationships and I guess animals as well. On another note, the production values were absolutely on point as well, especially the costumes and the makeup. Ironically, the story has a strong influence on that aspect anyway, but it just delivered on point. That was so clinical to how the character is portrayed on screen at such a young age and her path going from Estella to Cruella. And the visual spectacle of it was absolutely fantastic as well. And it's those kind of things that warrant Oscar nominations in films like these. And I'm making a very, very early prediction, but I can almost guarantee that it will get a production design nomination, a makeup nomination, and a costume one as well. Whether it will win or not, I don't know, but it's definitely going to be up for contention and probably will get a nomination, and deservedly so. But in terms of production, it looked good, the pacing of the story was decent, although I would say in some cases it did jump from one to another on many different occasions in terms of genre. Sometimes it was a drama, then it was a comedy, then it was a psychological drama, then it was a heist story. The pacing was a little bit off at times, but it definitely did justify giving Corella a backstory and the characters that came along with it as well. Now obviously we know that this film was going to be made, but whoever takes the role of Cruella has an absolute mountain to climb in terms of delivering a performance to such high expectation, because of course besides the Disney animated film, Glenn Close's portrayal is so memorable in 101 Dalmatians and 102 Dalmatians as well. And Emma Stone's performance I thought was absolutely fantastic. And she's definitely not the sweet and innocent girl that she won the Oscar for in La La Land, let me tell you that. She did have that in some ways as well, because of the original background that she had by playing Estella, where she was an aspiring young woman who'd gone through a bit of trauma in her life, trying to kind of climb the ladder within the industry. The price of her rising in the industry is the downfall psychologically. So this film explores Corella more as an individual person rather than as a villain who just has an obsession with Dalmatians. And it's not very often that the antagonist in previous installments end up being the protagonist who we follow. It makes us question about our entire perception of the character and how she became the way she became. And I think as opposed to Angelina Jolie's portrayal of Maleficent, Stone's performance as Corella was a lot more raw, it felt more realistic. It's not so much down to the actual performances by the actresses, it's more about the characteristics of the characters in general. But overall I thought Emma Stone was just fantastic, and she was definitely a good choice to play Cruella. Now on to the other Emma Thompson, who plays Baroness von Hellman. Whenever you watch any film at all with Emma Thompson, you just know it's going to deliver, because she's just an unbelievably talented actress, and I've always had a fond admiration for her. This one is no exception. In fact, this is probably one of her best performances in a long time, because in many ways she's almost like Cruella herself, where she has a bit of an ego, and she also has a very keen eye for fashion, like Estella does. She definitely captured that elegance of the upper class British woman, while also giving us a very theatrical and very melodramatic portrayal of that character as well, where you hated her more than Cruella. And it was her elegance that really captured that narcissistic, warped and self-indulgent kind of tone. Without giving too much away by saying this, it just goes to show that people aren't born bad, they're made bad. And the chemistry between the two Emmas was just fantastic, and I don't think they could have picked anybody better to play those characters. I really don't. Now besides Corella, there are two other characters who we all know very, very well, and they are of course Horace and Jasper, who in this film were played by Paul Walter Hauser and Joel Fry. Hauser in particular was absolutely fantastic, and he nailed the character of Horace absolutely perfectly. He was witty, he was funny, and in many ways likeable. For me watching it, I didn't really even dislike neither Horace nor Jasper, to be honest, nor even Cruella. I hated Baroness von Hellman even more than those three put together, and those three are traditionally villains. So it goes to show you are following a villain's backstory, but it also kind of makes you question, how did she become the way she became? I just feel that Fry and Hauser really captured a lot more of the true nature of Horace and Jasper, as opposed to Hugh Laurie and Mark Williams in the previous 1996 remake from 20 years ago. And I feel it helped as well that Fry and Hauser were two relatively unknown actors anyway, who really have got their breakthrough in this film. Fry and Hauser definitely did give us the traditional Horace and Jasper we all know, in terms of the oafish and the junky kind of perception of how we see them, but also gave us something that made us understand them a bit more, like Cruella really. But their performances were just fantastic in it, and I really enjoyed their roles in it. So in many ways, Cruella is pretty much like what The Devil Wears Prada would have been like as a heist story. Makes sense though actually, because one of the film's original screenwriters actually wrote The Devil Wears Prada, and also a similar film, 27 Dresses. So in terms of recruitment, Disney definitely knew what they were doing, and it worked. So Cruella overall wasn't necessarily a film that we needed as such, because we've seen the character that many times in previous films, but it was a very bold and interesting angle that Disney took with a spin-off prequel story about this character, because of the psychological themes that are part of her. But to do it for a child-friendly audience worked really well, and to still capture that melodramatic and theatrical factor about her character and her story really gelled together, and it worked. So what did you think of Corella? Did the film justify her backstory? Was it worth making? Are you just going to stick to the animated film and the live action remakes from 20 years ago? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, if you did go on to enjoy this video, please hit that like button and subscribe for more, and have a notification bell tick so you're notified when I upload a new video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care everybody.